Hello everyone, Indro here. In this video I'll walk you through the creation of my entry for Very's 50k contest. Very is an awesome digital creator from Russia, and if you haven't checked out her channel yet, I highly recommend you to go and check out her work. About the contest, she gave us few images of hers and we were to create an artwork with any one of them. And this image instantly caught my attention, and I imagined a scene of a machine apocalypse future with a bit of a cyberpunk theme. Now this was something new for me and I didn't create such an artwork before, so I went all over the place and made it complicated. It's like I painted highlights, shadows, and then again painted the highlights and so on. So please don't get upset if it seems confusing to you, but I'll try my best to explain the key areas. Alright then, without wasting any more of your time, let's create. So the first thing to do was to place our subject and cut her out. I used the subject selection tool and then refined the mask. I started placing the robots with different angles to create the destroyed robot pile. Also added some rubble and debris to make the foreground composition. Since the background city will be in the cyberpunk theme, and if I add too much detail over there, we will lose the focus from the foreground. So I added a smoke image as a screen to separate the background from the foreground. I also warped it as needed. Then I started blocking out the buildings in the background. I used the polygonal lasso tool to quickly draw out the shapes. At the same time, I used different shades of grey to create a sense of depth as well. I tried to keep angular shapes on the buildings to help guide the eyes diagonally from the bottom left to the top right. Here, the main inspiration came from the haunting visuals of movies like Blade Runner, Alita, Battle Angel, and games like Cyberpunk 2077. I took this image of a city with skyscrapers and simply added it as clipping masks to the building blocks that I created. I just moved around the same image to find the perfect building that matches the shapes, perspective, and scene I am going for in my composition. At the same time, I added a blank layer on top of it as a clipping mask and painted some haze with a grey color to create a sense of depth. This haze will add the atmospheric perspective and depth and make the distant buildings look far away and the closer ones nearer to the viewer. Now, if you want to know more about this concept, I have an in-depth video on this atmospheric perspective and depth. I worked really hard for that video. I'll be really glad if you go and check it out. You can find the link to the video in the description section. Now it's time to work on the foreground subject. I quickly darkened her up and adjusted her fit a bit using the puppet warp tool. I also darkened up the robots using exposure adjustment layers added as clipping masks. Worked a bit on her leg and adjusted it so that it feels planted on the robot. Next, I added the main sparks that will be gushing out from the robot due to the Katana stab. I changed the blending mode to screen and also played a bit with the blend if section to remove the dark areas. Adjusted some hue saturation and brightness contrast as well. I rotated the turret as it was getting blocked. Added some orange-red color on the katana to make it glow. I kept the blending mode to color dodge and linear dodge. Then I went ahead and painted some highlights on the robots, just to see where this is all going. I used my usual technique of adding highlights using a solid color fill in a darker shade of the glow color and keeping the blending mode to linear dodge. I painted the highlights with white on a layer mask filled with black. I also have a very in-depth video on this topic. It is in the description section. I think you will find it helpful. You can go and check it out. I quickly added some shadows on the robot by painting with some dark colors and keeping the blending mode to multiply. Next, I also added some initial highlights on Very using the same solid color fill and linear dodge technique. I'm just doing a rough highlight over here. I'll come back and polish it later. Next, I quickly corrected the perspective of the buildings a bit. Initially, I thought about putting the vanishing point at the center, but it messed up the angular look I was trying to achieve, so I shifted the vanishing point way off the screen and adjusted the perspective accordingly. Then, I accidentally added this beautiful sunset image and it entirely changed the color palette I was going for. At first, I was thinking about some muted crayon red color scheme, but this bright violet pink orange looks so good. So I started adjusting the haze color of the buildings to some violet tones and added some orange glow towards the base, as there is a battle going on in the streets and there should be some fire. But I had to pay attention so that I do not add too many details on the buildings and it would distract us from the foreground. I used color balance adjustment layer to quickly add a violet yellow color cast on our smoke screen. And I again went off with painting highlights on Fairley's hair and face. After further color correcting the smoke, I added the sparks. I kept the blending mode to lighten and also played with the blend if section to get rid of the dark areas. Added some blue with the curves on the robots to match the overall tone and started painting the highlights to see again where it is all going. I used the same solid color fill and linear dodge blending mode method, added some extra glow around the spark and refined the broken areas of the robot. Then I started adding some katana cuts. I manually painted some metallic charred parts with a grungy brush and a dark color. On top of it, I painted the glowing areas with orange-red color and kept the blending mode to linear dodge and color dodge respectively. Made some minor modifications to match it with the shape and form of the robot. Added some smoke and sparks as well to the cut. Duplicated it to fit on other robots and transformed and adjusted it accordingly. Then I thought about spicing up the cuts by creating a block cut. For that, I took this engine block image, transformed, skewed and fitted it and painted some glow just like before. Made some more refinement to other broken robot parts as well. Next, it's time to add some shadows on these robots. I painted them with a very dark grey color and kept the layers blending mode to multiply. It might be getting too dark, so I'll be adding some fire glow from the bottom and add slight hints of light to make the shapes stand out. Next, I was thinking about some ways to add more light on our subject. So I thought, why not add shafts of light emanating out from the fractured robot? I quickly created some shapes with the polygonal lasso tool, filled them with a yellow-orange color, changed the blending mode to linear dodge and added some blur with tilt shift. Also painted some more debris and concrete rebars in the very foreground to fill up the composition. Added little sparks to break up the dark foreground, and this will also be used to add a subtle red tinge on the dark robots to make the shapes and forms clear. Here I carefully painted some highlights on the concrete debris using the solid color fill and a linear dodge method. Also, I corrected the shadows as required by painting on a layer with a dark grey color and keeping the blending mode as multiply. Next, I painted some more highlights on the robots to make the shapes stand out. This time, for the bottom highlights, I used the color dodge blending mode. Once done, I moved on with fine-tuning the highlights on our subject. Made the hair a lot glowing, as hair density is low around the fringes and there should be much light because the sunset is at the back. Then I cleared up the sun a bit by moving the buildings. That should draw more attention to our central subject. Next, it's time to add some battle damage on her. I created a grazing bullet wound and added some blood-stained bandages on her arm. I removed some stains using the clone stamp tool and taking samples from the clear bandage. Then I added some overall color grading with a color lookup table. I set it to 3 strip, kept it to color blending mode and reduced opacity to 30%. I added another color lookup table, set it to Fuji Real 500D, changed its blending mode to color and reduced the opacity to about 15%. Then added a curves adjustment layer. I lifted the blacks, darkened the shadows and boosted the highlights. Also, I increased the brightness and contrast a bit using a brightness and contrast adjustment layer. In the curves, I also went to the blues channel and increased it on the overall composition. Then I added a neon sign on the distant building, which reads fairly 50k in the Japanese Katana script. This was the hashtag that we used to tag our images on Instagram. I quickly made it glow by playing a lot with the layer styles. I kept tweaking the inner glow, outer glow and drop shadow with blending modes like linear dodge and linear light just to see what looks best. Then I added some broken away parts to the skyscrapers. I simply took some images of destroyed buildings, masked them as required and color graded them by adjusting the brightness, adding some blue tint and adding the haze. I always made sure the perspective stays correct. Repeated the process for the other skyscrapers with different images of destroyed buildings. I also quickly fixed the angle and perspective on the middle right side building. I also added some dirt and crunch on her. Come on, she's battling all these robots and she can't be this clean, right? Then I added some smoke and sparks on the base of the building in front to give a sense of a waging battle in the streets. I also added some smoke coming out from the broken parts of the building. Now I didn't want to go overboard here as they might hide details. So I added just a little amount of smoke. Next I added some more elements to the composition like these stray bullets. And I started adding some more overall color tones. I created a blank layer, changed its blending mode to soft light and on it I painted with a dark bluish gray color on the bottom and top right areas, whereas I painted with a pale yellow-orange color at the center where the sunset is. Further added a bloom to the highlights. I took a solid color fill but this time kept the blending mode to soft light and softly painted around the edges. Finally, I added more details off screen, like making this center robot turret glow red hot with smoke coming out of it, just to give it a feeling that it was shooting bullets before being destroyed. Broke up the center buildings a bit to give more breathing room around her head, fixed some lightings around the skyscrapers that should fall because of the sunset, put in some flare bokeh and some flying debris, and some grain and a slight bit of chromatic aberration. So what do you think about the final result? Do let me know in the comments section below. If you like my videos, feel free to like them and share with your friends. And if you're liking my overall content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That would really motivate me to create more videos like this. Well then, I will see you in my next video and till then, enjoy creating.